So let's get started. We've got a lot to preview or review or look at today. I'd like to remind you that while I'm going through the catalog, it would be best if everyone mutes. And of course, this is a fairly extensive catalog because of the artist statements, which are fascinating. But I'm not going to have time, obviously, to read each statement. So I'm going to comment on some of the things that occurred to me in the process of going through the catalog half a dozen times and having reviewed all of the statements proofreading. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have some time just for some comments at that point. And I want to thank each of you who contributed, and I want to thank each of you who has come to celebrate today. And I also would like to remind you that on the screen, on your Zoom screen, you do have a place, I believe it's up underneath more with the three dots on my screen, it's on the top. And Barb, I know Barb Ide's here. Barb, if you want to jump in and I'm not telling this right, feel free to correct me. But I believe if you click on that, you can enlarge and close in a little bit more on whatever I'm showing on the screen. And that might be a way to get a close-up look at something, because each of these really deserves to have not only the statement read completely, but also to do a little bit of zooming in literally so that you can see some of the details.
Right, Jane. On my screen, it says view options up at the top.
Okay.
And this is a laptop, Apple MacBook.
Okay. Okay. And if you don't get to do that, or you can't find that or whatever, you don't want to mess around with anything else, this will be available on it. Actually, it's already there. Santa put the link to the program that we use when we put the catalog online on our homepage, and it's already there. And if you want to go back in and zoom in using that particular service, it makes it really easy. And I may even show you that in a minute here if I can. Yeah, as a matter of fact, what you'll be able to do is on the bottom, if you won't be able to do it right now, but if you go to the link that's on the website, you'll see a bar down the right-hand side where you can literally slide it back and forth in order to zoom in. So there will be opportunities at some point to look in more detail or up closer at any of the pieces that you'd like to review again. So here is our esteemed list of exhibition artists and my statement, which is pretty much the same statement that I always share, which is essentially describing what archetypes are, because of course this catalog is available for people on the website so that anyone can see it after our special conversation today. And of course, it's also on Amazon. And so if somebody bought the catalog, they could literally read through it. And I think the statement is designed to help them. You already understand all that. So we're launching with a piece from Gigi, and Gigi got very interested in paper mache this year, and so this represents a kind of a shift for her, although she's multi-talented. And this is made of lots of smaller pieces, and so that you understand the meaning behind it. And I will use that button and move it up a little bit. If you look on the right-hand side, because this is so detailed, do you see the figure upside down there? That's La Colgante. And that is a Spanish word that has a double meaning. It means pendulum, but it also, or not pendulum, but pendant, but it also means, let's see, Gigi, if you're here, I looked this up and now I'm not sure I've got the whole thing. But this is a very symbolic piece about being in the in-between. And so the above is the heavens and the below is the earth, and La Colgante is suspended in between, in the Nepantla, the liminal.
You did a great job. Yeah, Colgante means hanged one, hanged woman.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I thought I had this all in my head, but I obviously needed some notes. It's a beautiful piece, Gigi.
Thank you.
Next up is a piece from Allison that is about her magical child, which she considers the foundation of all of her archetypes. And what you'll see as we go through these, what interests me the most in looking at each of the individual images is how artists have told stories, first of all. And so the storyteller has engaged for many of us, whether we have that in our house of 8 or not. And in addition to that, the symbolic elements that each of us comes to when we're designing pieces. And so this was actually inspired by a record album cover, but if you look closely, you can see the hands on either side of her face opening to the world and also becoming part of a butterfly. And so this is a really beautiful, beautiful example of the magical child in Stitch. And up from Anne Marshall is the Canyon Guide. And some of the statements were relatively short and I can't really improve upon them. So this is the one who follows her inner knowings and escorts others through space and time, which is one of the things that Anne does in her professional life, in addition to being very, very much involved in archetypes. The guide seeks the light over the deep channel etched from eons of years by ancient influences. It's a beautiful quilt. And from Anna Gordy, we have this wonderful and very abstract wounded healer. And this piece reminds us of imperfections and scars. And I love it that she quotes at the end Leonard Cohen's words, "There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." Beautiful fired ceramic piece. Holy, holy, holy. And from Barb Sorge, a delightful representative of the child archetype. The rabbit, you may remember that she's used the rabbit in the past as a symbol of her child. This features, of course, the bright colors and also the wonderful, what I love about this is that she discovered the woman, which you see embroidered and enhanced there inside the rabbit. And so it's woman within the child, and then an additional little bunny rabbit turned up also. And she discovered those just in the course of working with the embroidery and then chose to enhance them, which is one of the beautiful ways this spontaneous work can unfold. And from Barb Ide, continuing in her series that explores archetypes, as well as being inspired by archetypes. And that's another interesting thread that runs through all of these pieces. In some cases, an archetype is visually represented, and in other cases, the archetype was actually working alongside in the creative process. Barb has come to a very effective combination of capturing elements and manipulating them digitally, including the image of the World Book Encyclopedias. Her statement is really delightful in terms of her desire to, after she received the encyclopedias, to report to the class and beginning a project with the assistance of her teacher. And so you see her here sitting literally on top of the world and on top of the books. And from Bridget, a lovely piece celebrating the dilettante. She says this particular one portrays the light side, and she has constructed the artwork to showcase the various textile techniques of which she is so fond. And so there is a real selection of very wonderful, important dilettante-esque techniques that are included in this particular piece. And the cheerful colors and dark ones are a reminder that the dilettante, whether light or shadow, is always waiting in the wings. And from Carla, a wonderful assemblage, My Winding Pathway. In this case, dimensional and a combination of her curved ladder, which she created by wrapping with fabric strips and then adding the leaves and the birds, which were in her stash. I think this is a really beautiful dimensional piece that represents her nature child. And from Carol Labori, beautiful piece of Jumchi, which is a Korean paper felting technique. And she references here the dilettante again, live and well and exploring all kinds of processes. But I think also there's some reference to the child in terms of the exploration and the delight in the discovery. Somebody needs to mute. I can't tell who it is without changing the screen, but take a look at your microphones, please. From Carol Pollard, a masterpiece which took several years to come to fruition. It's quite large, as you'll see if you look at the dimensions. I was fortunate, many of us were fortunate to see this piece in person in Tulsa last summer as part of an exhibition. I can't do it justice with just a few short words. It is, of course, called To Walk in My Integrity, which is a hallmark of Carol's artistic process. And I do hope that you'll take time to come back and read her statement and then zoom in and look at all of the individual parts of this quilt, which represent each of her archetypes, each of which also includes a line of from literature or from poetry that is relevant to the archetype as she understands them. And from Cassie, Joy Absolute. If you look carefully at the overall shot of this piece, you can pick out Joy Full in yellow as part of the abstract nature of the piece. And she admits it didn't start with a plan. It began with wanting to try free-form pieced letters, and those became words. And then if you look carefully, you can see in the detail an embroidered hummingbird. And I love work where you enjoy looking at the piece across the room, but when you move in, you can really appreciate these finer details and the fact that the artist took the time, made the commitment to add elements which are not automatically obvious, but which are definitely a beautiful addition. And she said it best, my best soul-satisfying art is the stuff that causes my heart to flutter and makes my voice quiver when speaking. And Joy Absolute does that. From Christine, an abstract, smaller piece, very beautiful shades of neutral, inspired by an exercise in color analysis that was done for the embroidery enthusiasts group. And again, Christine is inspired by lines from songs and poetry, and there's an aspect of that to this particular piece too. And this is a wonderful testimony to the fact that a small piece can carry a great deal of energy and power, and that size is not always significant. And from Denise Osso, red clay ceramic piece inspired by the drawing, the delightful drawing on the right, which her daughter did for her at a young age. Denise's story is really pretty entertaining. This is the Queen Mother. Denise never actually connected the Queen drawing to herself. Eventually she did. I think it was through a discussion with her daughter. And she wrote, how could I not know I was the Queen? How does one who is born to rule learn to live with the empathy that the mother teaches? Maybe if I look at Queen Mother for the next decade, I will understand. Maybe. And maybe I should just ask my daughter. Diane, beautiful piece called Intentions. As you will know when you read her statement, she was inspired by the White Stone ceremony last year, or I guess actually that was the beginning of this year, when we were each invited to write a word on a stone that would be the kind of touchstone password for the year. Diane went so far as to write those down as they were shared and turned them into this beautiful piece, celebrating those words and those commitments in wonderful color and in the words themselves enhanced with gold leaf. Diane Cutler has gone through a rather strenuous and at times discouraging experience of seeking a diagnosis, which eventually was Lyme disease with multiple tick-borne infections, and has really struggled. And so this beautiful, beautiful piece, The Heroine's Journey, Dark Places, is an indication of those dark times and those struggles. And yet the piece itself is incredibly powerful because it witnesses to the strength and the groundedness that we need, and that hopefully Diane has found in her effort to come to terms with that illness while continuing to make spectacular artwork. And Eleanor has launched her child into action, and the child in her is endlessly curious, and these jelly plate samples gave her an opportunity to explore color and all of the tools, and what can be better really than child's play, and then sharing it. Beth Salvia has been exploring her archetypes and befriending them. And in this particular piece, she invited the seeker to choose a symbol, which is one of the things that I've suggested several times in the past, that we each have our own vocabulary of very sometimes surprising symbols for the archetypes that we encounter and who claim us. And this little yellow-rumped Audubon's warbler represents hope, renewal, and determined persistence. And she sketched the drawing and then went into a very beloved stash that she knows by heart in order to create this intimate piece. And I think creating the piece and doing that exploration enhances her seeker's journey, and then represents in and of itself hope, renewal, and determined persistence. Ellen Baranowski, I loved it that she tied some of the archetypal understanding to biblical references, and that she commented that part of moving so frequently in her life taught her to be all things to all people, as the Apostle Paul counseled, and that the equivalent of that is, in some sense, in the most positive of ways, the shapeshifter. And so this is a piece that shifted several times in the creative process of making it and exploring it. And the final piece is designed so that the napkin, which is the background that you see, the square, will actually float and shift, which is reminiscent of the shape shifting in life that she herself has recognized. Esther Collins, a wonderful saboteur mandala, hand-stitched, and again, the intimate scale that some of this work demands or suggests. In this particular case, 7 by 7. And if you look carefully, the center dot represents the individual self. And I love it that she's put the light side of the saboteur inside the boundary of the mandala, and she has put the shadow side of the saboteur outside that boundary, which is a good place to leave it. Delightful piece from Ginger, entitled Storms Never Last. This represents the abandoned child, abused and neglected, and the idea that when a tornado leaves our lives and crosses the riverbank, our lives can be replaced with light and hope, which is symbolically represented by the use of the colors that she put together here. It takes a lot to come back from stormy periods, and I think that this very simply and eloquently tells that story and is very, very nicely resolved. And another story of hope from Ginny Ewers. This is Making the Decision and Taking the Risk. This is another piece that really I can't do justice to. So many of them. There are details I could point out, and it would take longer than we have at this moment in time. But if you look carefully, you can see that the bars of the cage are the words that hold her in, and the bird is sitting on the perch contemplating flight beyond the cage. The door of the cage is open, and there is a decision to be made. What is outside the cage that makes it worth the risk? The branches of dogwood, one of the first flowers to bloom in the spring and a symbol of hope. And so you can see again how each individual artist chooses elements and chooses particular colors and chooses an expression, a portrayal with the door open to the cage, for example, that tells a story that is larger than what you see when you first begin to study a piece. And I looked at this for the 7th or 8th time, the catalog, I mean, and thought how many of these really are studies in hope. And Jackie Manley's tree is another example of that, the practice of serving others. The branches reach out and the unseen roots support and protect. And all of that is part of how she sees herself, the servant, anointed. Jacqueline Jacoby, in a way, another piece that's about hope as much as it's about anything else, even though it's entitled Flummox. And it is a visual telling of her, at first, perhaps confusion with understanding. She used the word bewildering and frustrating, trying to understand all the nuances of archetypes. The initial perplexing feelings are represented here, but over time, and because of the discussions that we've had in the last couple of years as we've reinvented CST, she says, I know myself better and I understand where some behavior originates. And therefore now she sees that she can be kinder to herself and be a better self. It's a beautiful example of all of that. And Janice Updike Walker's continuing exploration of goddess in a variety of different permutations. I loved the fact that she referenced Persephone as the child and Aphrodite as the woman and lover, Hera as the wife and queen partner, Athena as the warrior and craftswoman, and now as the matriarch of her family, relying upon Hestia, the wise woman, keeper of the hearth. This particular piece depicts Aphrodite, the goddess of creativity and good fortune, wisdom, grace, power, and sensuality, using again her signature ability with beautiful stitch. And Jan Glisson, I had to laugh in referencing her statement. She wrote, when she first encountered the warrior image, which is the woman on the top right, after a piece failed, she said, in my wildest creative dreams, I would have never imagined being delighted with this outcome. And the warrior responded, now it is for you to understand how far you've journeyed creatively. And so this is, as she has named it, the totems and talismans of the emergent warrior. Jeanette Floyd was influenced by Zena's video on neurographic art and received, she says, such a calming feeling and wonderment when viewing the video. And so she decided to try her hand at actually creating neurographic art on cloth and found it to be an extremely delightful and playful experience, which put her in touch with her child. And you can see that in the vibrant colors and the beautiful sort of tossed down like blocks or cards orientation of the pieces on this quilt. It's the child's essence coming through Jeanette. Wonderful assemblage piece from Joyce Martelli, If the Forest Could Talk. And in this piece on the left, you see Diana, the nature child and goddess of the forest, and Misham, the rescuer in the middle, and Scheherazade, the storyteller at the edge of the forest, discussing what they've seen. And she goes into more detail about her story of this in the statement, but I just want to admire and study each of those figures. I wish I could see this in person up close and see the details, because it's a very, very rich tableau that she's created in a very compact size. Karen spends the midsummer through fall in Vermont, as opposed to Florida, where she lives in the wintertime. And she is influenced greatly by the colors there. This is an incredibly beautiful piece, Autumnal Dryad. And she talks a lot in her statement about what wasn't working and how she just needed to kind of go with the process. And we all know how frustrating that can be. And yet we all have had the experience, pardon me, of a positive outcome. the beautiful figure with her arms raised here is really a celebratory piece as far as I'm concerned. This is how I read it. She wrote, "I continue to be amazed at the fluidity of the creative process and the flow. I've always thought of it as a conversation between myself and my artwork. It tells me where I should go and I respond." Karen McCann has a particular attachment to the statuary in old cemeteries and in the peacefulness of those environments, and has tried to capture that, has captured that very well in this piece, Stone Mystery. If you look closely, you will see an angel statue, one of her original photographs, along with some others that she manipulated and combined in this very contemplative piece, which is meant to help us, the viewers, experience some of the peace that she gets from finding these gems when she visits those environments. Karen Riggins has discovered her engineer. And she writes, "I think it showed up in the seahorse piece. I had to use the engineer side of my brain to figure out how to do the coral and the sea anemones and the jellyfish and how to put it all together." And brava, Karen. It's a really beautiful piece and very cohesive. Kathleen rose to a challenge that she was feeling internally to recreate her creative life and work, and was challenged to think about combining her Arashi Shibori with her newly found, and I believe loved, botanical printing. And Cosmos on the Water is an example of how those two came together for her, and that represents for her the faith that she has in herself and the courage to step out of a comfortable place in order to grow as an artist. She says, "My confidence level has soared and I feel free to let my child play and create. I am feeling truly aligned as an artist." And I love that these two are back to back, because we don't do that on purpose. It's all alphabetical. It's all alphabetical. But what a lovely lead in from one beautiful piece to another, and both featuring these incredibly orange, vibrant flowers. Kathy is driven to create without needing to worry about layering. She isn't so rigid that she can't accept things that are unexpected, but her engineer helps her understand the need to construct work so that it's complete as possible with minimal changing. But then when something happens that's unexpected, her gambler can take over. And this is a beautiful example of those two playing in tandem with each other. Beautiful and rather unusual piece from Kirsten. Kirsten referenced, this piece is entitled The Clearing, a poem, The Clearing, by the Swedish poet Thomas Tranströmer. I'm not sure about that pronunciation. I'm really good at butchering words. But for her, the poem is about a place in a forest that can only be found by those who have gotten lost. And so this piece is inspired by that poem, but it's also related to places that where things happen in our lives that are perhaps unpredictable. The clearing is all the unexpected things that happen when you're lost and you don't know what you're looking for. And she enjoys creating and combining different skills in her artisan-made books. And so that is one of the things that led to the combination of these beautiful painted pages with the wooden frame, or the wooden cover, I should say. Kristen Rohr, it's a simple statement and I couldn't say it any better. When I'm drawing, is the scientist or the artist wielding the pencil? Whether it's a detailed map of the river's fan delta or a delicate fan of a pansy's petal, at heart, it may ultimately be the mystic worshiping, like a medieval scribe in the simple act of transcribing. Beautifully said. The description is as poetic as the piece or these pages themselves. Linda Dawson. Linda Dawson's archetypes work together, and in the past year or so, she's been particularly interested in these drawings. This is the Dharma chakra, also known as the Dharma wheel. And her engineer started this by creating the underpinning framework. And then her artist took over, and you can see the eyes that are added to each of these spokes. And I loved it that she suggests that the engineer has a deep connection to the sixth chakra and uses the third eye to find solutions to problems. There's a great deal more symbolism in how she made this wheel, how it came together for her. And that continues to be one of the most exciting things about exhibitions like this, is that each of us brings to the artwork that we create, and therefore to the collective table, so many different ways of thinking about symbolism and of thinking about how to claim it and make it our own. Linda Geiger's piece, Our Happy Place, referencing a surprise trip that she and her brother were taken on by their parents. A delightful piece. This was a photograph originally, and she recreated it so that she could stitch, and it has connected her to her inner child, and it certainly is a storytelling quilt for me. Linda Nelson Johnson has returned to her love of fabric and botanical printing, and these pieces that she's been creating reference lots of different approaches and archetypes. In this case, I would say that the child is in this piece, even if silently, because of the swing. Her artist is always involved, and I believe her engineer plays a pretty important role in making these lovely pieces happen. Lindsay Webster has been working this year with images from the Holocaust and also from Hiroshima. And this particular piece, Fearless Boy, she writes, seeking justice, the light side of the judge archetype beckoned me to visually represent humankind confronting the unthinkable, a nuclear war. At the same time that we do this, the Fearless Boy is reminding us that when confronting injustice and the unknown, we can find strength and embrace the future with courage. Lisa Check wrote a beautiful poem to go with this lovely collage of hers. Heroine's journey round mind's eye through heart and hands, spiraling, circling, then, now, and coming, splendor. Be, artisan, be. Louise Roby's delightful child archetype necklace. She played and dabbled with bins and jars of gathered possibilities and objects and keepsakes, and the teddy bear has been with her for years. It's the main child on this necklace, and each of these parts is still explaining to her why it's there and what it means. And she says, I will probably be learning about my child from this necklace for years to come. Lucy Snyder, very involved in liturgical art in the past, and recently has been working with also embroidery and quilting. This is a mixed media piece, and she has written a haiku for each of her 12 archetypes and incorporated them into this mixed media piece. And of course, there you can see the haiku for her dilettante, but if you zoom in at some point, you can read each of the archetypes in the piece on the left. Lynn Bainbridge was inspired quite a while ago by a Hellenistic statue, and it was only 8 inches high, she wrote, but it's the figure of a veiled dancer, and she has represented that as the shadow side. The shrouded and masked figure spoke to me of the drag of demands and imprisonment of the spirit. Part of this was illness, and part of this was what we all experienced during COVID, and I think it's a powerful representative of that shadow. And on the right, you see the light side of the prostitute, which it took Lynn a while to actually begin to acknowledge this and find the light side. She wrote, "I couldn't find my way toward the friend prostitute." And yet now here she has located the friend prostitute, and she has turned her into the dancer, swirling and dancing in the meadow with that cape. Linda Wingrove, also a storyteller, works in a narrative symbolic style. This is her prostitute. And basically a synopsis of the story is that the prostitute put herself into the cage of society's rules and other people's expectations, thinking that this was a safe place. And when she decided to release herself from that cage, lo and behold, things weren't automatically okay. There was still a long path to wander, to walk, and the only way to go was through. The cheetah symbolizes her higher self, and the cheetah knows that along the dismal path through Hellgate and into the raging inferno, the only way out is through. Lynn Lee has continued to work with her incredible abstraction and the quilted surface, and continues to work quite large. This is 89 by 79. And this piece represents the components of both shadow and light as she sees them, in her ability to translate all of that into very powerful abstract form. A small and yet very lovely and powerful piece from Meg that is also reminiscent of the nature child and walking on the beach, using cyanotype, which is, of course, a chemical, sort of a very sort of primitive photographic process. But she says, "My work is influenced by my deep feeling for the natural world," and that certainly comes through in this lovely piece. Thought it was interesting that this piece followed on the heels of Meg's piece because of the colors and repeating the circle. This is Mary Mason Banks. And this is her beginning exploration of many more pieces to come that will explore her archetypes. And this is self-centered because as a mandala, that's the whole point, that's the purpose, to focus inward. And she wrote, "What is it I seek? Truth and beauty, maybe once upon a time. Was it I seek? To get up every morning with love in my heart, to live in authenticity as best as I am able." Nan Travers, Liberator. Nan's been working with the Tree series for, I've lost track, several years, using felt. And the Liberator is particularly interesting because it represents not only the reuse of some materials or pieces that failed for her and have been given new life, but the idea that a liberator does upend, and that in the process of that, new growth can occur. And so she has created this piece that is symbolic. When we look at it, we get that message from the story, but it's also reflected in the use of how she made it, which makes it even that much more interesting, and I suppose probably meaningful for her. We were treated to a case study from Noelle earlier in the year. This is a piece from the series that she's been using this year to explore all of her archetypes, and this is the piece that references the seeker. And she is capable of using very simple and direct colors and elements and simplifying effectively in order to tell her stories. And there is a great deal of power in that. It just shows you the range really of what we have here. It's pieces that can be very complex pieces with lots of figurative parts that fit together, and then pieces that are very simple, almost deceptively so, but equally powerful. So a very large piece of noise. It's 20 by 96. So that can't ever really be done credit or get its due in such a small catalog format. I would love to see the piece in person, but it was actually inspired, it's entitled Crescendo, And it represents her love for music and theater and imagination all put together in one piece. And it actually is a visual representation of Ravel's Bolero. If you're familiar with Bolero, it starts very quietly and it does build to a crescendo and sort of an explosion. And she has represented that really beautifully in this piece. Paula Deen has been exploring her archetypal team for a fairly long period of time at this point. And this particular piece is focused on the saboteur and the committee. And I think that when you work intuitively and the story begins to tell itself, as is true with Paula, that the discoveries are in some ways perhaps even more profound. But she did write that creating this piece allowed me to analyze the voices I perceive as constantly judging. I'm closer to recognizing the voices for what they are. They do not deserve the power I've given them. Delightful figurative piece from Paula Straw, Symbiosis. And if you look carefully, you will see, you can see it in the close-up on the right-hand side, that there are words that represent what she is trying to achieve in her art and therefore in her life. The child, the student, the artist, and the storyteller, saboteur, and prostitute were all involved in making this piece, and their attributes are depicted in the words. And she says, metaphorically, this is my lesson, how to be in relationship with my archetypes, the way a grapevine is in relationship with human beings as part of allowing it to bring fruit to the table and to turn that fruit then into wine, a process that is a symbiotic process. Sarah Mayo, a delightful piece, her medicine zodiac shield. This is a jewel box of little parts, each of which is related to an archetype for her. And I want to point out that there is a small accordion book. You can see it there in the bottom of the photo that actually folds up and fits inside that little tin. And that is her book of 12 archetypes. And she says, my shrine box protects the cosmic aura of the subconscious. Is it my story or our story? Dream on. Charlotte works with archetypes in a very, Jean, I really know her as Jean. Jean works with combinations of archetypes, and this represents her artist engineer in a really, I just really love the way this comes together because it's screen printed. It is a combination of organic, which represents the organic shapes represent the artist, and the geometric shapes represent the engineer. And the colors are also illustrating two sides of thinking. The building of shapes is an exploration of layers with clear or ambiguous edges. And so one of the things about these pieces of hers is that they really, they're very coherent visually, but they also have a great deal of depth when it comes to addressing ambiguity and complexity in thought. So her statement is one of those statements that I can't do justice to, and I hope you will take time to read it later. Cheryl Miller engaged with her nature child, and this piece is a beautiful and very vibrant and happy expression. She loves the garden, she cultivates her garden, she works with themes that are based on the garden, and this is all of that sort of spiraling around this young child in a way that just speaks to playfulness and the delight of color and shape. It's a dance. And what better piece to be juxtaposed with that than Sonia's magical child, dressed up as a princess, amazed at the reality she has created. Tomorrow she can be another character in a different time and place. And she's done a beautiful job of representing this with the complementary colors. She has actually been working with putting figurative elements on linear lined backgrounds, and you can see that in this particular piece. But that girl's got such a great look on her face. I just think she's an imp, just waiting to do some magic. And of course, our cover from Sonia. The cover picture, actually, this is a little bit light, but I hope that you can see the figure behind the cheesecloth on the left-hand side of this. It's very, very effective. And she writes about being the invisible child. I've unconsciously made myself invisible in social situations by being quiet and observing. Sometimes I felt completely invisible, almost like a ghost. My challenge is to stop hiding and take a more active role in my heroine's journey. It is a very poignant and poetic representation of that, Sonia. Susan Buckingham, Winged Messengers. There we go. This is based on a dream that Susan had, and the raven is reminiscent of the trickster, and the trickster is the creator's helper. So she's wondering whether there was a message, and the way this piece evolved perhaps was part of that message. And it very beautifully addresses the idea of winged messengers and where we can have familiars, animal familiars, who come to us with messages. As many of you know, I had that sort of an experience with a white ladybug after my mother's passing. Beautiful mixed media abstract piece from Susan Goldie. And she commented on the fact that she worked very quickly, which is unusual for her, in order to accomplish this. And sometimes I think that's an advantage. We can get into something and then stand back and see it for what it is. And she alluded to that when she said, I feel this represents an opening to an alternate consciousness, a meditative place where I can connect with forces greater than me. Susan Smith's piece called on her artist and her saboteur and her rebel and her magical child. And it's a beautiful example of finding her tribe. You can see the outlines of the women in the detail at the bottom, and the music and the other elements that are symbolic of hearing music and rhythm in the outdoors as a nature child, and seeing that she does no longer need approval for what she creates, and that her heart and soul are happy when her vision of art is the most important thing, and that's what matters, staying true to herself. And Tree Ely, The Many Colors of Winter, is a beautiful, another contemplative piece in many ways. She says it combines her nature child, engineer, and artist. They came to the forefront when she was conceptualizing the design. This is a beautiful representation, not only of her memories of birch trees in Minnesota, but also of the aspens where she lives in Colorado now. And so you can see again how artists look to the world around them, and especially to the world close at hand, in order to find the symbolic elements that then later are translated into the work that they do. Trish Hanna. This is a piece that also began as a cyanotype. The reference back to Meg's piece. The chemicals are mixed together and they are activated by UV light. And she writes the results are predictable or unpredictable because of all the variables. And in fact, this piece is a picture of her father's Royal Canadian Air Force graduating regiment in 1943. And her father went on to suffer post-traumatic stress, as did many who came back from that war. And that had an impact on all of the lives of everyone around them. And she referenced that back to the use of the cyanotype, because the effect on all of those families were results of something that was predictable and also very unpredictable. Vicki Fincham, another raven. This one for Vicki represents intelligence, transformation, insight, adaptability, and those are all qualities that she has discovered in herself as she has let the dilettante lead her through art explorations of all kinds. Vicki's been focused on all kinds of new materials. I've watched this unfold. This is a beautiful representative piece of that process and that path that you've been on, Vicki. And it all comes together in a really lovely way here, incorporating so many different things. Zet's piece, The Goddess in You. There is a mirror in this piece, The words on the side of the shrine can be translated as seeing one's nature becoming Buddha. And she used the mirror to encourage the viewer to become immersed in the process of becoming the goddess, becoming the Buddha, becoming your best self. It's a very contemplative, beautiful altar. And the goddess is sitting in repose, reflecting what has come before and what is ahead, but mainly encouraging each of us to stay in the present moment. And from Zoe, Brave Spaces. This is a continuation in her photographic explorations of the archetypes. This is The Seeker, and again, a piece that really can't be done justice in a small photograph. It would be better when and if you can enlarge this and really look at it because of the elements that are here. But Zoe wrote, the seeker reaches out and acts externally and also reaches within to find further understanding, discerning which core beliefs are assisting her, which are helpful, and which just weigh her down. The seeker is a reminder that all climbs and questions can bring rewards as long as they are untethered to manicured looking paths and specific outcomes. Grace is found in our efforts. Now, this year we did something a little bit different. The Hard Truths Anthology is the last part of our exhibition. These pieces have some archetypal references in them, but they're specifically from the Social Practice Art Group. The Social Practice Art Group requested the opportunity to be part of this exhibition, and so I'm delighted that we have their work to round out our time today and to round out our catalog. You can read these statements, but essentially they were inspired when their topical group came together. They were inspired by Jill Littlewood's Big, Bad, Beautiful Brown project. And you can read more about that on her website, but this is, her particular project was an exploration of the issues around race. And the group expanded to include all kinds of explorations in social practice or in social justice topics. And so I'd like to share just a few of these pieces that were submitted for the exhibition. Actually, these are all the pieces that were submitted, but this doesn't represent the entire group. From Al, we have simply words hurt, pronouns bring joy. Use them, it could save a life, simply. And so this represents all of the derogatory phrases and words that are tossed at non-binary people, and an exploration of that. And there is more information on Al's website if you would like to visit that. The address is in the statement. Carol is an advocate for Mother Nature and has been ever since she was a teenager. This piece is particularly concerned with plastic waste. And each of the statements in this particular part, all of the statements in the entire exhibition are worth reading. Each of these provides information on various aspects of the challenges that we face as human beings on the planet that are worth reading, and certainly beyond what I can do justice to in just a few simple comments. But this particular piece of hers is a mixed media art quilt made from single-use grocery store packaging that's been cut and stitched into this quilt. And she says, unlike a traditional quilt, this is neither warm nor snuggly. The food may be mostly healthy, but the packaging should come with a warning label. And another comment on waste, this time fabric waste from Dixie. Lots of information here that is worth considering, worth thinking about in terms of how we ourselves, since many of us are textile artists, could do things differently or help in some way. This piece is specific to 81 blue reused fabric pieces that were used to create it, because each of those represents a pound of useful fabric that one American throws away every year. And so the advocate archetype urges you to be a part of the solution, reducing, reusing, and recycling. Ileana Soto has worked with social justice themes very, very frequently in our association and friendship together. This particular piece started as a reference to creatures in the sea. It became a piece about gestation in general. As she worked on it, she found that a sort of a womb-like form emerged, and she wrote, throughout the forming and reforming of this piece, the archetype of the mother called me. Mothering myself, I call attention to the interrelatedness of our environments. Nurturing one nurtures the others. Beautiful piece. And Jenny, born in Australia in the 1950s, this is a piece that references the fact that she as a woman has lived through years of hope, disappointment, and despair, and has found it difficult to speak out, and that this particular piece is meant to trumpet the common experiences of all women. And she says, little did I realize my own pain would be stitched into the work. So this is about power imbalances. It's about the terrible words that are used to refer to women, and also by extension to others. And a very powerful piece from Jenny. One of Jill Littlewood's brown books, this is number 42, obviously just a little bit of that particular series that she's been working on for years. This is an attempt to address the legacy of Western domination expressed in the phenomenon of colorism, prejudices around skin color. And Jill has a website. There's also an address on Instagram that you can find here in her statement if you'd like to see what other artists have done with the books that they've received, because she's created more than 200 of them and given them to anyone who would like to work on one. And then they are part of this project, which is an ongoing project of Jill's, which has inspired all kinds of other projects in the best possible sense. Beautiful piece from Joe Thomas with a very quiet and serious meaning. This is called Unsilent. It's an attempt to convey visually the current movement to promote truth and acceptance and equality. And it's another example, as there have been many in this exhibition, of abstract ways of creating work that is profoundly beautiful and also imbued with meaning that is not always automatically recognizable, which is why the statements are so valuable. Joanne Hoffman, piece on gun violence. That hit close to home when the shooting in Colorado happened last month for Joanne. And she wrote, there is no need to have assault style weapons available anywhere. They're not used for game hunting, they're used for people hunting. I grew up sewing, and now art quilting brings all my skills together. I'm pleased when I can use my voice to call attention to social issues. Kathy Garrett issued an invitation to other artists to create a 6-inch bowl, and she has here assembled them in this piece entitled Empty Bowls, which is meant to shine the light on the fact that so many Americans, including 9 million children, experience hunger every day. She was a school nutritionist and she observed this firsthand, and creating this piece is her way of hoping to raise awareness around the issue of hunger. And she issues an invitation for anyone who would like to make a bowl to make one and send it to her so that she can continue to expand this piece, which will hopefully be shown in other environments in order to send its very important message. Lisa Heller's piece on abortion rights, safe and legal. The circles represent women as vessels. The fencing represents the women and medical practitioners who've been imprisoned. And of course, we're all too familiar with the coat hanger. And another piece on the same topic from Lisa Jenny. Lisa's lived in a number of different countries. Under different laws and political systems, human rights and autonomy of the body has been a central point in the constitution of every country, and its interpretation has led to equality. And so in this piece, Her Body, Her Choice, that influence and voice continues to be heard. Marilyn Waite, Forced Migration. This is a 3-part piece from a woman who's been a tireless advocate her entire life. The top is focused on or representative of the 20 million people who are displaced every year. A lot of this has to do with climate crisis, but it also has to do with destruction and devastation, which is what's represented in the bottom 2 pieces on the overall piece. And Marilyn chose materials destined for the landfill in the ocean in order to drive home an even larger message about how all of this is so related and so frightening. This is a very interesting piece from Marty. In this particular piece, if you look at the top left, that represents recognizing white supremacy patterns of individualization, disconnection, disassociation. And then she reworked it in order to create the collective new learning, initial grouping and solidarity there. And then on the far right, you see the reshaping whiteness without supremacy, greater solidarity, shared leadership. And lo and behold, a heart emerged when all of those parts were rearranged. And Marty pointed that out and goes into more detail about how all of this was symbolically represented. And it's a very interesting piece that's made even more interesting and brings a deeper, greater meaning when you take time to really read the statement and understand what's being said here. And a piece from Nancy Tully that references all of the 171 armed Black and Brown people who've lost their lives at the hands of the police. And so this is meant to literally record the names and point out the great loss to parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, children, brothers, sisters, neighbors, friends. The loss is immense. And ultimately led Nancy to several questions that we can't explore in detail now, but that are the hard truth of racism in this country that we are all mindful and need to address. So that is our exhibition. I'll stop the share. And I welcome your comments and your questions if you have any of them. It's a powerful, all of it was a very powerful thing to consider. And I'm I'm speechless. So somebody better say something.
Maybe we could say
Bravo.
Yeah, bravo, bravo. We can start with that. And I suppose that we don't want all hell and chaos to break out here, so we should probably use the raise hand feature.
I've already unmuted myself. Can I speak?
Right ahead.
I just want to say that I am totally amazed at the thoughtfulness and the beauty and the whole thing is just absolutely fantastic. It really makes a person think about what's going on in the world, especially this last part of it. But Jane, I need to say thank you to you and to everybody in this group for making a safe place for all of us to be able to be who we are. thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Candy. Those words are much appreciated by all of us, I know. Mary,
Well, I agree with Candy completely. It's just overwhelming, really. What a wonderful group, caring group of people. Thank you. Thank you all.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Denise, glad to see you.
I'm in a trance. We're all in a trance. This is so wonderful. I just want to say thank you. Sorry. I want to say thank you to you, Jane, and to Zena, and of course to Wayne for everything he did to lay this beautiful book out, even better than last time. I'm so honored to be here and so glad that I am. Congratulations to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate all your kind comments and your appreciation. I appreciate your appreciating. Hope you have a full weekend. And, oh, it's not even the weekend yet. Shoot, what day is this? I don't know. Anyhow,
Wednesday.
I'm just going to wish you a good evening, whatever that means, and you can take it from there. So have a good holiday if this is one you celebrate, whatever it is. Stay safe and be well. And thank you
also.
for a good year.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. There you go.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, everybody. This has been very
Thank you.
Bye.
Love
Lots
to
of
all of you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.